All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Getting Started with Genealogy Basics. My name is Valerie Edgeworth, and I'm one of the CE consultants here at KDLA. And with me today, I have my colleague, Kathy Crum, who is a supervisor in our cataloging section. So Kathy's here for the chat today. Any questions you have throughout, please go ahead and feel free to type those in the chat box. And Kathy will make sure that I don't miss anyone or any of the questions. Just a few housekeeping rules real quick before we get started. I'm not going to be able to help anyone today with a very in-depth question or roadblocks in genealogy research. That's not what this webinar is about. However, if you have a question that you're having trouble with, or a patron that's having trouble answering a specific question, if you want to email me separately about that, my email address will be up on the last slide of the presentation, and I'd be happy to help you with that and make sure that you get in contact with the right person that can help you with any of those. Your certificate of attendance will be emailed out by the end of the week. There will also be a packet of additional handouts that will come along with your certificate of completion email. I do this just because I don't want you to get overwhelmed by the amount of material that we're going to cover today, so I didn't want you kind of going back and forth between all the different handouts. So that packet will come with your certificate. Also, I'm going to beg and plead for just a brief moment. If you would, please complete the survey. We are looking very closely at them right now and need that additional feedback, not only to help us determine what trainings to offer in the future. It also helps us as far as our IMLS funding, which this webinar is partially sponsored by IMLS funds, and to make sure that we can report back to them our customers' needs and how we are meeting them. So please, not just for this class, but any classes you take, fill out that survey for us. Okay, and with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, thank you, Kim. Not a problem. We will make sure you get credit for attending. So jumping in, here's kind of an overview of the things that we're going to talk about today. And again, you don't have to wait till the end. Any questions at any time, just go ahead and type them in the chat box. I kind of tend to rattle on and on about this presentation, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. We're going to start by reviewing some of the steps to begin genealogy research. We're going to discuss some basic research tips. We're going to talk just briefly about some of the most commonly used genealogy records. I'm going to briefly touch on a variety of research repositories, institutions in Kentucky where you can do research, and then a few online resources. And again, my caveat here is this is quite a lot of information to absorb. I will be providing several reference sheets for you about specific record information at the conclusion, because again, I didn't want to overwhelm anybody ahead of time. Just to give you a little bit of background on my history and how it came to be that I have the wonderful opportunity of giving this presentation. I have been at the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives for 12 years. I've been in the profession for almost 15 in the library world. My first 11 years were spent in archival research. I've worked both at the Kentucky Historical Society as well as here at KDLA. I've spent many of those first 10 years here at KDLA in the archives research room, so the one-on-one help with helping those do their research. I was also responsible for cataloging and outreach and education on the archive side. So again, this is one of those things I could go on and on for days about. So it's nice to mix my new role in CE in continuing education for you as public library staff with my passion for genealogy. So why do our patrons care? Why are they researching their family histories? There's a lot of different reasons, and a lot of those reasons may affect how and when and why they're actually doing their searches. It can be fun. It can also be frustrating, but it's fun for a lot of people. They want to find more out about themselves or their families. They may have a specific medical reason that they need to find something out. Someone may be adopted, or those DNA tests that are so readily available now. They may have gotten a DNA test for Christmas and gotten the results back and like, oh, I didn't know I had Scandinavian lines. I want to find more out about it. They may have friends or family that are interested in genealogy research. That happens to be the case in my family. My parents used to rotate when I was a kid, picking out our vacation spots. And my dad, while he normally picked the beach, my mother would pick a site of our ancestors' heritage to visit. So one year I'd end up at the beach. The next year I'd end up in Washington County, Virginia, in Abingdon, looking at court records at the courthouse with my mother. So a lot of that kind of geared me in my education and looking at archives and libraries. So that's how I my interest started in it. Also, it could be their religious beliefs. You never know why people are coming in. It's just our responsibility to try and help them. These are tips that I share with everyone, and it's not just for beginning researchers, but it's also for you as you're beginning to help anyone in doing their research. Be patient. Genealogy takes time, and I cannot stress this enough, especially in the last decade when we've had this instantaneous need, this 24/7 drive for access to information. That is just not the case with genealogical type records. While institutions such as Ancestry or FamilySearch.org have done a phenomenal job of trying to make accessible as many records as they can, it is almost impossible for every institution to have every single one of their records available online for research. So just be patient. It's such a nice thrill. It's such a happy ending when you can help a customer. And even if it's only one record or one index page or one newspaper article, that is just as much to be excited about. So you just have to be patient with it. I also encourage you to make sure to be open to what you find out about your family. I've had many experiences here in the research room where some of our customers would be a little shocked as to what they might find in their family history from something that happened 100 years ago, 150 years ago. We're going to talk about folklore and traditions a little bit later, a little bit more in depth. But I try to remind any researchers that I help, especially in the beginning, just be grateful that you have found something to lead you back to that next generation. So be open to what you find. Document all of your research. I cannot stress this enough. Not only will it help you as the librarian, but it will also help them so that they can remember where they left off the day before, the week before, the year before, or the decade before. That they are able to tell you what they've looked at in the past. I encourage them to write down the page number, include the URL if it's a web link, to date when they actually viewed that web page or that resource. And if they have information on who helped them find it, I think that can be helpful too. Good documentation should be with you at all times when doing genealogy research. Now, that being said, I have several colleagues that would take binders and backpacks and bags, carts, even carts full of research. A lot of people will divide their research maybe by surname or by family line or by the state or county with which they're researching. So whatever works for you and your filing system, just make sure that you reiterate to all your customers that it's very important to document all your research. Handwriting differs over time. We see that a lot here in a lot of our Kentucky records. Letters are going to vary, and that is something that if you're not familiar with, that some of our staff here in the research room could help you kind of decipher some of those different handwritings. Different letters were used, V instead of C. Like in the word public, it used to be written P-U-B-L-I-V instead of L-I-C, and things of that nature. So, and the other things to talk about spelling variations, which we're going to go a little bit more in depth about as well in the future. So, say you have a patron walk into the library and they're just saying, I'm here to learn about my family history, or my son has a Cub Scout project and needs to fill out a basic pedigree chart and learn about himself, his parents, and his grandparents. Most pedigree one-page charts just starts out with those generations. It's a good idea to have a blank pedigree chart available for your researchers. I'm sure a lot of you probably have Kentucky research rooms or local history rooms within your library. At that reference counter there in that room, it's a really good idea to have blank pedigree charts sitting there. When somebody is just starting out and they have no idea where to start, I tell everyone to start with themselves. Start with what you know about yourself. That would include you writing out your information about you, then information about their parents, and then possibly information about their grandparents. I have found that most people can't really go beyond their parents or grandparents without digging a little deeper. But if you can help them start to fill out that pedigree chart just with that little bit of information, it's a positive experience, and it can help them to continue to move forward. Then at that point, I encourage them to start talking with family members to help gather family information and stories. Regardless of what you can tell them maybe about the town where they grew up, or the family histories that could have been written regarding that same surname in the area, starting with your own family, if possible, is the best way to get started. Lisa's got a great question here. Where can you find pedigree charts? I will include a copy of a blank pedigree chart with your packet at the end of the presentation when I email you your certificate. There will be a copy of a blank pedigree chart in there. Google also works very well for a wide variety types of pedigree charts. If you just Google free pedigree charts, there are 1,000,001 different types. Jama, I know you're typing in right now. You might actually have a suggestion too, but there's 101 different types of free pedigree charts out there. Great question. You're also going to want to search a wide variety of records that your family members may have access to. This could include Bibles and yearbooks, photographs, and yeah, Jama, I'll include that link on Ancestry. Thank you for including that. Letters, personal correspondence, all these sorts of things that may be useful to you in searching family history. As I teach this topic of genealogy basics to you, I know my own life better than anyone else's, so you're going to get a lot of stories from me about my personal experiences here. One of the neatest experiences I had as far as searching family records was with a great aunt who was researching one of our Irish lines in Ireland. And this was the early 1980s, and she came back home from a 2-week visit in Ireland with a phone book. And she had gone through, she was in County Roscommon, and had gone through the last name and marked all the people that she had tried to contact of our family line, whether they were willing to talk to her or not, included their information, and then had stuck a sheet of paper in the phone book of how they were related to us. I didn't know this until she passed away in 1996. So it was a really neat find, and I never would have known that. So you never know where you're going to find information. And I'm a gatherer of information. I have a very hard time throwing anything away, and that was a really neat find. So you never know what people might find when they search their own family stuff, as I like to say. Especially in Kentucky research, as well as when you jump the pond if you had to head over to Europe. Location, location, location is everything. In the state of Kentucky specifically, most records are arranged by county. Now, that is the county in which they were created or filed in. One of the most frustrating record types when discussing location in Kentucky is actually marriage records, because a marriage license issued in one county is valid in all 119 other counties. So if you have a bride and groom, and the bride is from Fayette County, but the groom is from Boyd County, and they got married in Mount Sterling, which would be Montgomery County, your first indication might be to check Montgomery County, and they're like, well, no, can't find it there. Then Fayette County would be an option because that was the home county of the bride. Boyd County might be your third option to think about because that was the home county of the groom. So that's where I talk about patience, be patient, be patient. The other thing along those same lines is the county boundaries change over time. I'm going to include some links here in a little while. Actually, I want to go ahead and pull those up now. KDLA, our General Researchers page, has a lot of information here, but I have two links that I want to go ahead and include here in the chat box. Here's the link to the county formation chart. It will tell you over time the dates with which counties were formed in the state of Kentucky. It'll tell you their founding order, what number county they were, the parent counties they were formed out of, and their county seat as well. And again, as you're searching public records, that is very, very important. The other one goes with this last bullet point here, and I've just added it in the chat box as well. And this is the Kentucky Courthouse Disaster List. And disaster is our all-encompassing word. It refers to fires, floods, water leaks, any sort of thing that could result in a loss of actual records. And the really neat thing about the courthouse disaster page, please wait till the end of the presentation to look at it. I don't want to lose you. But one of the neatest things about it is that, disasters have happened as recently as the early 2000s or late 1990s. So it'll tell you, the disaster list will have not only when the county was formed, but when the disasters occurred. And what happens is, say Anderson County, for example, had a disaster in 1915. That means that records prior to the year 1915 may not exist anymore. So that's just kind of what that refers to. So keep that in mind. Any questions about location of records or anything that I've talked about so far? I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask any of their questions while we're here today. All right, with further ado, here we go again. Moving right along. There's two main types of records that I want to talk about today, and many of you are probably already familiar with these. First are public records, and those are referred to as primary sources. And the second type is private records, which are secondary sources. So let's go into a little bit of depth about public and private records. So some of the private records that a lot of people are going to want to research when researching their family histories, I've included a couple of samples here. First and foremost, I like to talk about the census records. These are a federal record. They are available on Ancestry.com. They're also available on FamilySearch.org. And while these records can help determine migration patterns, the census is taken every 10 years. It can be accurate to a point. The reason I say that, I include this image here of Harper's Weekly from 1870. Can you all type in the chat box, what do you see from this image? What do you feel when you see this image? What can you describe from this image? We see a census taker. We see several adults. We also see several children. What do you all think about when you see this census taker taking a census record? I'm curious. A family gathering. Julia, that's perfect. Different generations, yes. He may be overwhelmed. Malta, you hit the nail on the head. These are all perfect. This is what frustrates me immensely about census records. They are only as accurate as the person giving the information and as only as accurate as the census taker could write them down. People make mistakes. Homes were left out because maybe nobody's home when the census taker came by. Maybe there was just a child playing in the front yard and the census taker didn't want to knock on the door. Maybe he was tired, he had a long day, and he asked that child for all the information. And you know, the dates could be wrong of his parents' birth. I mean, you just don't know. So this image, while it's meant to relay, please participate. It is an exciting thing to be a part of the census, and I agree. I enjoy filling out my census information when the time comes around. It may not always be as accurate as you had hoped. But again, as far as migration patterns, especially in early Kentucky records, and trying to document where people have started and where they're coming from, where they're going, they are extremely important. And each of the biennial census years, additional information or questions have been added. One of my favorites for the 1930 census record is, do you own a radio? And I just think that's a really neat question. There's a wide variety of questions asked every 10 years. Samples of each federal census form is available on Ancestry.com, and I will make sure that I link to those as well for you. Any questions regarding general overview of census records? Okay, Malta, keep typing. I'm going to roll on just a little bit. I like to talk about birth records in Kentucky because we have a couple of different dates, and again, I will include an informational sheet for you that will help break down those dates. But the two most important dates to remember as far as Kentucky birth records, the first is 1852, and the second is 1911. 1852 is important because there are no official register of births kept in the state of Kentucky prior to 1852. So at that point, you know you're going to need to rely on secondary private type sources, your Bibles, your family histories, and things of that nature, your gravestones, obituaries, and newspapers to help pinpoint those dates of births and deaths. 1911 is the second date. Between 1852 and 1911, some counties kept record. Some of your larger cities kept city registers of births. In 1911 is when our most recent vital statistics law passed that required that all births and deaths to be registered with the state. And so this is actually a register listing from 1852. This is, and it was required that the counties kept them, but they didn't go out and get them. You actually had to go into the courthouse to actually get it recorded. So this is what a register of a birth looked like in 1852. Some have a lot of good information, some have nothing. It might just have the kid's name. It could just have an owner's name listed as the father. Again, it varies between county and records. And again, just because you know somebody was born after that 1852 date doesn't mean you're necessarily going to find it either. The 1911 is a little bit more accurate. Here's an example of a death record. Those same dates apply, nothing before 1852. So you're going to want to make sure to look at tax lists or tax records, estate settlements, obituaries, the gravestone for death information. This is actually an example of a death record from I cannot read, but it's post the 1911 date. I might have to zoom in a bit. I've had this record on here for quite a while. The register for deaths before 1911 looked the same as the births. It's just that registered listing. The post-1911 I like because it gives you the possibility of getting a lot of good information. I'm going to attempt to use the arrow here. Right here it will show you the cause of death. But again, this information on a death record is only as accurate as the person giving the information. So down here, there's the chance that it could include birth information, the birthplace, the name of the parents. It's also going to give you the funeral home information. Like this person is buried in Lexington Cemetery. Cemeteries can be a great genealogical resource. And again, it may lead you back to additional information. It's going to tell you about their marital status. Again, the information is only as accurate as the person giving it. I have one whole line where a neighbor provided all the information, what little they knew, and all of the birthplace information all just says, don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know. So it's again, it takes both the primary sources and secondary sources to get the most out of your research. Okay, and Malta, let's see here. I too have found the 1930 census a lot of borders listed. Yes, I actually have an ancestor who was a railroad foreman on a chain gang in Augusta, Kansas in 1930. And I was so grateful to find him because I'll have you know he left his family in 1918, left him in Kentucky just high and dry. We could not find him in 1920. So in 1930, I know Henry and I know where he was. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to find anything since. I found him in that 1930, but that was a huge thing for me. And he was actually living in a border house, and it had all the borders listed just as you described, and said he was a chain gang foreman on the railroad. So again, vital information in those census records. Again, I apologize, but I know my own life better than anyone else's. So marriage records. There are a wide variety of the types of marriage records that may exist in a Kentucky county. And I'm going to refer to a book resource that if you do not currently have in your collection, I strongly encourage you to get. And I'll explain why in a little while. This is an example of a marriage bond. And it states that this person is that the bond that these two individuals that are listed right here in the middle of the bond are planning to get married, and a $100 bond is paid. That does not necessarily mean that they've gotten married. The types of marriage records that exist are all dependent upon the county and the year. And that is one of those phrases that as you begin to help your patrons more in the library, it really is contingent upon the county and the year as to what exists. And when they ask you why, you'll be able to state, well, Depending upon the years, records may not have been kept. They may have had a fire or a flood. So all these sort of things affect that information. Let's see here. Okay, here's a few examples of private records. Again, the information is just as accurate as the person who recorded it. I have found Bibles to be extremely accurate. I have also found, if they were filled out during that time period, if you've got a family Bible that hasn't been filled out for 50 years and say Grandma decides it's time to fill in all the information, it may just be to the best of her recollection, and that's fine too. Just be sure to include notes on that, say recorded with Grandma so-and-so on this date, and that way they'll know that, oh, she was, you know, close to 90 when we went through this with her, just so you can go ahead and verify that that information is correct by using public sources. I am a huge fan, shout out, and again, selfishly, to the McGoffin County Historical Society. I have a branch of my line in eastern Kentucky that was in McGoffin County for many, many decades. And each year, the McGoffin County Historical Society takes a surname and asks the members of the society, of the community, or anyone involved if they have information on that family in that county at that time. And they spend a year gathering this information, and then they publish it. And it's amazing what you can find just based on that. And again, they verify the sources. It's just a wonderful resource. And I'm sure many of your local historical and genealogical societies do that as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what a great resource they are. Let's see here. Okay, before I dig into a wide variety of other types of records, are there any questions about the basic differences between what's considered a public record, what's considered a private record? I'm going to talk a little bit here about us at the State Archives at KDLA versus the Historical Society in a bit, and that's where that comes in as well. Okay, moving right along into looking at some other record types. Let's see here, Malta. Yes, Malta, I agree right there with you. I grew up in Johnson County, actually, so right connected there to McGoffin County. And as far as Eastern Kentucky research, I would 100% agree with you. They have one of the best resources out there for Eastern Kentucky research. I've just included a link here in the chat box. This is the link to the Kentucky Secretary of State's Land Office. Excuse me, 1 minute. The Land Office here, under the Secretary of State's office, they're actually in the annex at the Capitol. They are the place to start when researching Kentucky land acquisitions and learning information about Kentucky cities and counties. Land was allocated in Kentucky via the patenting process, and the Secretary of State's office has all of the information regarding to the patents that were issued within the Kentucky boundaries. So those issued by the state of Virginia prior to statehood are there, military warrants, non-military warrants, and anything else you could ever think you might want to know or learn about land in the state of Kentucky. I find it to be one of the most overwhelming parts of research if you have an ancestor who had an original land patent in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And we as in KDLA, as well as the Kentucky Historical Society, have film copies of all of the land patents. However, I would start your researchers with the Secretary of State's office on site because they have digitized those records. Some of them are available on Ancestry as well, but start with the Secretary of State, and then if you need additional help with that, Candy Atkinson, and I'm going to type Candy's name in, is the main contact at the Secretary of State's Land Office. Candy has been working there for over 30 years. Some of you I know have attended our Public Library, or not Public Library Institute, our Archives Institute in the summers. Candy is one of our frequent speakers there discussing land records. She's a wonderful resource. That is the main place to go. Why are we going to search our land records? Land records will tell you a lot about, indeed records, again, both public records, will tell you about where your ancestors have settled. It may give you a little bit more information about the industries. Were they farmers? Were they industrial? How did they migrate? Lot of good information can be found in land records, and we have a whole separate webinar just on land records. Military records are a phenomenal resource. I'm going to show you a resource in a little while called the Civil War Soldiers and Sailors, especially for those who lived in the state of Kentucky who had brother against brother. The Civil War Soldiers and Sailors database is a wonderful resource for the Civil War, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Other military records exist here. The Archives Research Room is working on a project right now for a bonus that was issued in the state of Kentucky in the early 20th century that was given to veterans of any war. And actually that goes back all the way to the War of 1812. Mainly it was Civil War veterans. We have one set of military records available on the KDLA e-archives, and those are the state Confederate pensions that were distributed. And let me see here. Oh, my apologies. We just changed the name of our e-archive after several years. It's now referred to as the Kentucky State Digital Archives. My sincerest apologies. It's going to take a while for me to change my mind on the new title, but I've just included the link to the new State Digital Archives. The Confederate pension applications are available there. You can search by name, you can search by regimen, and they're really just fun to explore too if you're trying to learn more about the Confederate pensions. Cemetery records are huge. This is where your local historical and genealogical societies come in handy, and those family histories. A lot of time these groups will get together and they may transcribe a cemetery for you and be able to tell you where those plots are located, if they're family plots, who all's buried there. It may give you your basic birth and death information. Cemetery records are extremely important for that. Then you can go back to the death record and pull the actual death certificate. Court case files and order books. When I talk about records that can't all be digitized and available yet, at least here in the state of Kentucky, this is the main section that I'm referring to here. Is we are the repository. We, KDLA, sometimes we'll say the state archives, is the official repository for court case files in the Commonwealth. If the county itself does not have the space to hold on to these records, or if they want to send them to us for preservation. This will include both civil and criminal case files. I can tell you right now they are absolutely awesome to look at. This is also one of those situations where don't be overwhelmed what you might find out about your ancestor, especially if they might be the defendant in a criminal case. There are just wonderful things that you might find in court cases. It may have a history of the person given. It may have other biographical information regarding their family, how they were raised, or tell you more about their occupation. But case files can be a wonderful resource. Again, newspapers. The University of Kentucky has the most comprehensive collection of newspapers available in Kentucky. They are no longer digitizing newspapers, but they have. I'm sure a lot of you already may have your local newspaper on microfilm. Kathy's going to type in the chat box a little bit more information about the UK program there. Tax records. Tax records are another one of my ultimate favorite records because tax records were taken on a yearly basis. They are a wonderful way to help understand the migration patterns between the biennial census years. It's a great way to track year from year. Like, say you have my own personal example. I have family in Franklin, Simpson County, Kentucky in 1815. And from about 1815 to about 1828, we see them every year in the tax records. Everything else in Simpson County in that time period burned, but the tax records didn't. And then in 1830, we have found them in a census record for Missouri, so that we know that they've moved on at that point. So again, tax records are a good yearly record, annual record that you can research. Again, we've talked about family records, Bibles, photographs. I adore photographs. I I feel like some of those snapshots that we've had all throughout the 19th and 20th centuries were life as they were. Here in the 21st century, we're a little bit more liberal with deleting our images that we may not feel represent us the way we want to be represented. And that's going to be interesting, I feel, in a couple more generations to see how people are viewing our ancestry and the way that we did things during our time period. And so we're a little bit more specific on that. I think about Iwo Jima and the photo of the American flag being raised. It's my understanding that that was not the best image. It was considered, no, that's not the one we should use at first. And yet that's the image most people remember from the flag being raised there. Oral history interviews. I'm a huge fan of genealogy in general, obviously, but I really like oral histories as well. There are so many things that you might be able to get out of a family member in talking with them. They may just be more comfortable talking. They may not be a paper keeper. They may not be a record keeper, but the histories are there in their minds. Oral histories are wonderful for that. Yeah, Kathy's got a story.
When I was going through graduate school, I took an Appalachian culture class, and one of our projects was you had to do some type of, essentially it was some type of written history, and so I actually did an oral interview with my grandfather, which he led quite a colorful life. He was on a battleship in World War II that sank, and he was part of during World War II, the Bataan Death March. He was one of the Avengers of Bataan that went in and got the people out. But we also found out in that interview that the reason my family ended up back in Kentucky is that my grandfather actually kidnapped my father and took him to Kentucky so that my grandmother would move back with him. So you just never know what you're going to find out in an oral interview.
That is a perfect example, Kathy. Lois brings up a really good point, too. Thank you for sharing, by the way. Lois brings up a good point about photographs, that it is important to label them and to have names on there. Both of my grandparents just recently died in the last couple of years, and I've been scanning all of the photos, and none of them are labeled at all. My grandmother wasn't very good about printing either on a timely fashion, so I might have like 300 photos that all have the same print date, when obviously I can see that all 4 seasons are represented, all holidays are represented, but I may just know a year or something. One other thing I want to bring up real quick about oral histories is we recently just did a library link up in October on innovative genealogy programming. And one of our presenters there, Kathy Von Lloyd from the Scott County Public Library, gave a wonderful presentation on some of the things that they're doing there in Scott County regarding oral histories. They're actually working with the Nunn Center for Oral History at the University of Kentucky. And they have a sound recording booth where people can come in and record local Scott County residents, as well as equipment that you can, I believe, check out. You might want to double check with Kathy on that, but I've included the link to their Kentucky history pages there as well. Oh, JAMA, that would be wonderful. And I'd like to go ahead and put a plug in after you get moved in and you do a podcast. Maybe we could share that via a webinar too and how that all works. That would be wonderful. Okay, so we've covered the basics, but I know a lot of it, sometimes when people hear the word family history or genealogy, it's just, oh, challenge. And it is a challenge, but challenges don't define us. We can make it through them. We can all work together. It's a very passionate group of people, and they want to help each other. I have found many times the research room here at KDLA can be super busy, and while we're helping patrons as well, they're helping each other. And that's what I find wonderful about the communities, the community programs I know you're always having, that you're already having in your libraries. So this is one of my most favorite slides, and you can see why it would be one of my most challenging slides. What's in a name? And these are just a few of the wide variety of examples that I have come across over the years of how things can just be mislabeled. Kathy just brought up a great example from her life, from Mullins and Mullins. You know, my last name is Edgeworth. It comes out as Edwards, Edgewater, Edgewoods, Edgeworths, a wide variety. There's another great example, Jama. So again, Those are things to keep in mind. And again, institutions like Ancestry and Family Search, and I know a little bit more about the Family Search side of this, I've been involved in it before, they use volunteers for their transcriptions and indexing, and people make mistakes all the time. I was going to bring this up in a little bit, but it's applicable now. I have a line in my family that's in Indiana, and when Ancestry first got big about 15 years ago, 20 years ago now, I was looking at it, and it had down India for their location. And again, there's a minor typo, very minor typo, between India and Indiana. However, the geographic location of that typo is pretty massive. So again, take it at face value, have a good laugh at it, and just try a wide variety, of spellings. Keep that in mind. These are all great. Yes, and Malta, a lot of it is outsourced. So again, these mistakes happen. People are human. It's the same with any record. So just be sure to reiterate that. Here's another thing, not just typos, but just spelling variations. And this is one of my favorite examples of the name George Washington Smith. And again, I've only outlined 8 ways here that you might see Mr. Smith's name written out. And again, it depends on who the note taker was, who the county clerk was at the time, who the circuit clerk was at the time. I have an example from my family. I have a great-grandmother whose first name was Polly, but her nickname was Pop. And so like 5 of the 8 children that she gave birth to, the birth records all just say Pop. It doesn't even say Polly. So, I mean, it just, you just never know. Yeah, and Keys, Beverly, there's a great example of another last name. So again, sometimes you just have to get everyone to think outside the box. They know their ancestor's name, George Washington Smith. However, is that the way it was always written? I don't know. So just be positive and just keep them looking for a different way. Okay, moving along here. Here's another example with 3 different last names. I'm really enjoying seeing your all's varieties of your names or names that you've worked with. That's wonderful. So again, we also know that one name could evolve into another name. And I think Robertson is a very good example of that. You've got your Robertson, Robertson, Robinson, and then eventually it turns into Roberts down there. So again, it's one of those things that we know the Robert, and sometimes the S may be consistent, it may not be. But again, we just have to think outside those boxes. We don't want to let those roadblocks stop us or our researchers from continuing their research. One of the most neatest programs I've ever heard of is called Tea and Sympathy. Sherry Daniels, she's one of the librarians at the Kentucky Historical Society. They have a once-a-month gathering where they come together. She keeps it small, like 10 to 15 people. And I know some of you other institutions have similar programs where they come together and just discuss their roadblocks. And what a great title, Tea and Sympathy. Let's come and have some tea and join our time together, and I can tell you about my genealogy woes. I just think that's absolutely wonderful. A wonderful, neat program. Okay, we're getting closer to lunchtime, and this is my ultimate favorite story in the world. Is the story of the pot roast. And I include this picture here because I just don't know how else to put it. My family cooks a pot roast a certain way, and this recipe comes all the way down from my great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. And as I was growing up, I was attempting to learn how to cook. I'm still learning how to cook many years later. As I watched my mother, she would trim the pot roast very equally on all 4 sides. And to me, the meat looked completely good. It's not like it was bad or had extra fat on it or anything. She trimmed it. And I just said, well, why do you do that? And the only real answer I could ever get out of her is, that's the way your mama taught me to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And so I went to my grandmother and I just said, why do you trim the roast this way? And she said, well, that's how, exactly, who's the cook? Yeah, it depends on who's cooking it. So the way my grandmother cooked it was she always trimmed the fat. I said, or trimmed the sides, so it was more square. I said, why do you do that? And she said, well, my mother, your great-grandmother, the pan was never big enough. The meat was always larger than the pan, so they had to trim it to make it fit. It was simple. I don't trim my pot roast. I have gone against the tradition of my ancestors, and I don't trim the pot roast because it's good meat. But it was, the folklore was something as simple of, it's just the way we've always done it. And getting back to the origin of it was, well, the pan was never big enough for it to fit. To me, that's huge. Folklore is important. People are just as passionate about the stories that they've heard about their family. Try your best not to discount those at all. I still love to make pot roast, and I'll send a picture to my mother or my grandmother, and I'm like, hey, look, I didn't trim the pot roast today. So, but now I know why. I know the history of that story and where it came from. I see many of you are typing. I'm going to wait here just a second so that we can not move forward. I'm hoping we have some wonderful folklore stories out there. So I'm going to pause for just about 10-20 seconds. Buna, my pot roast is extremely simple. I cover it in olive oil and kosher salt, and I pan sear it on the stovetop just till the outside's brown. And then I stick it in the crock pot with my vegetables on top, a couple of cans of chicken broth, and I let it roast for about 6 hours. Yeah, if you want it written down, I'll send it to you. But that's all there. That's all I have to my pot roast. It's very, very simple and yummy. Let's see, we've got the story of the woman who was a Cherokee Indian. Oh, yes. Most Cherokee Indians are princesses. That actually brings up a very good point. We have a lot of individuals that come to the Commonwealth looking for information because they've been told they're of Native American heritage. The state did not keep any sort of records or documentation on that. We do automatically refer them to National Archives, and I will make sure, the research room used to have a handout on that. I'm going to double check with them, but if that handout still exists on the Native American research, I will make sure to include that in your packet as well. It's a great point there. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on, although I do want you to keep typing in your stories here. I love to hear it. So many online resources exist, and they are wonderful. And again, we do live in a 24/7 informational world. Most of our library catalogs are, yes, and the Dawes records can help with Native American too, yes. A lot of us have digital collections, or at least access to our catalogs online. Ancestry.com, Family Search, Heritage Quest are all wonderful. The internet, I have a love-hate relationship with it when it comes to genealogy. There are Find a Grave and several other cemetery and obituary resources out there that are great. I just always encourage, obviously you can't tell them what to do, but I strongly encourage anybody I'm working with research-wise to go back and find that primary resource to validate any of that information you may find on the internet. Sanborn maps are a wonderful resource. The fire insurance maps are a great way to see where where they were living and how the town is mapped out. And the other resource that I promised to include here, and again, selfishly, because I know my family better than anyone else's, yes, Malta funeral homes are great. And along with the funeral homes thing, hopefully that information about the funeral home might be listed on a death certificate. So then you know which funeral home to try and look for. Just included the link here for the National Park Service Civil War Soldiers and Sailors database. I have 2 lines of my family that were literally brother against brother in the Civil War. They originated from McGoffin County. Those who sided with the Confederacy stayed in McGoffin County. Those who went with the Union actually moved north to Lewis County. And so it can be very difficult sometimes when researching a soldier's name, especially if it's a common name like maybe James Robert Smith. You can actually search just by name in this database, and it will show you the options or the possible relevant searches for both the Union and the Confederacy as well. And again, that's one of those things where you might have a shocker for somebody in their family history. They could have been told for generations that someone was in the Confederacy, and maybe they were in the Union. or vice versa. So that we have always found that to be a wonderful resource. Okay, Jamma, I haven't done the DNA test. I'm maybe going to ask for that for Christmas this year. So Native Americans on both sides. Okay, and none on yours. Okay, that's interesting. And then, yes, Amy, again, folklore is important, but again, these DNA tests, I don't know much about them yet, but they are starting to help us understand and interpret things a little bit more on a higher level than we've been able to in the past, a more detailed. You can't get more detailed than genetics, a much, much more detailed level. That's wonderful. So, yeah, that information, again, you kind of have to soften the blow sometimes because people know it's the way it was. It's the way it was. That's the way I've been told. So it's hard. Oh, good, Jamma. That's the perfect example. It's helped me change the direction of my research. That's wonderful. So, real quick, I want to give a breakdown of a few Kentucky-related sites. Many of these you may already have bookmarked somewhere. Maybe you don't. If you don't, it might be if you have public access computers in your Kentucky rooms, this would be a great place to already have these loaded. The Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. Again, we are a public records repository here. We are mandated by law to keep certain parts of both state and local information, and that includes at the elected official level your governor's papers, their executive journals, and elected officials' records. On the local level, again, those go through your local county and circuit clerk offices. However, if they do not have space to keep those records, we keep them here for them. There's the link to the Kentucky Historical Society. I like to refer to them as our sister agency. They have a wonderful collection as well. I personally feel you need both the private and the public records. The Historical Society is the keeper of those private records, your family histories, your surname files, things of that nature. A lot of times with beginners, if they come here to KDLA and all they have is a last name and a county, we will actually say, we feel you'd be better off going to the Historical Society first, seeing if they can help you get started just by county or surname. And then once you've got your names figured out and your dates, come back here to KDLA. Let us help you pull the marriage record, the death record, the land information, once you've got your dates and your specific information. There's the link to the Kentucky Office of Vital Statistics. I get this question a lot. Yes, we only have one phone number for them. It is an automated line. We have a lot of customers that contact us with frustration that they may not be able to get someone on the phone. There is anything we can do about that, but if there's something we can help with Vital Stats, again, we will try and help in any way that we can. I've already included the soldiers and sailors before. Let's see here. The Kentucky Gen Web Project is a wonderful community-based project where people get together and work on a wide variety of types of resources and services. Again, if you're interested in finding records that you can help transcribe or work with, the Gen website is a great place to get started. Many of you are already doing this. You may have, most of you do have, I believe, a lot of local records, Kentucky record collections in your library. Yes, and like Malta just said, there isn't a society there, so they're the keeper of those records. You're already doing this day in and day out. We are here to help you with that. Any sort of things that you're struggling with, I'll make sure to include the contact information for the Archives Research Room Supervisor, Walt Bowman, and his staff down there. The Archival Services branch is willing to help at any time with anything. And again, you can email me, and I'll make sure that they get that information as well. As far as various public libraries, personally, I'm going to give a shout out to Kenton County. A lot of my Irish Catholic ancestors came to Central Kentucky and then moved up to Northern Kentucky in the Southern Ohio, Cincinnati area. And Kenton County has a wonderful collection there of those resources. That brings me to another good point. Kentucky borders 7 states. And a lot of times if you're dealing with one of our counties that borders another state and people are just getting frustrated, they've lived here their whole life, why can't I find their death record? Well, they could have died out of state, or they may have gotten married out of state, or they could have given birth out of state. I have an example in my family. We lived in Eastern Kentucky, but I have several family members born in Huntington, West Virginia, because that's where the larger hospital was. So again, even though they were raised here, and they came home here, they were not born here. They were born in West Virginia. So that's another one of those things bordering 7 states that can make a huge difference as to where they might need to be researching. So not just county borders, but our state borders as well. Here's the print resources I wanted to bring up. There is not a new edition of this book. It has only been printed once, and that was in 1992. And it's by Dr. Roseanne Hogan. Dr. Hogan spent months here in the Commonwealth researching information about the types of historical, genealogical, and family history items that exist in the state of Kentucky and where to find them. So again, this was done early on when online catalogs were just starting to come out. You know, the web hitting in the mid-90s there. This is right before that. But Dr. Hogan does a phenomenal job in breaking down each record type, what it covers, what it exists, and for those records from the 19th and early 20th century, that's not going to change. That information is already there and it exists. If you do not have a copy of this in your collection, I strongly encourage you to get one. I think we have 4 or 5 just in the research room alone. It's one of those resources when somebody comes in and says, well, I don't know the difference between a minister's return, a marriage bond, a marriage license, and a marriage certificate. Dr. Hogan has a whole section in that book where you can go in and it's all broken down. So that's what the cover of the book looks like, so I wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. Let's see what Lisa said here. We have a limited section, genealogy section in the library, and love to get with the society about sharing information and records. Yes, Lisa. That is one of those great community partnerships in working with your local historical or genealogical societies. Okay, Dickie's Diaries is also a great resource. Reverend Dickey traveled most of Kentucky and wrote notes about his travels. Thanks, Malta, for including that. That's not one I've ever heard about, so it's always good to hear and learn about something new. I'll look into that. But yes, anytime you can merge resources with your historical or genealogical societies, it's good to do so. Want to make sure we get through this all again real quick. We have talked about all of these places today as to where you can do research. And with that, I want to wrap it up. I do need to finish right at 11 o'clock. I'll stay on here for a couple more minutes. Any questions or concerns or comments, please let me know. But that does conclude our presentation today. Again, you will be getting several handouts when I send out your certificate and your survey. If there's anything else I can do for you regarding genealogy or getting started or those roadblocks, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you all again for attending. We really appreciate it.